Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the Frequency Community Call. We've got a packed agenda for today. It is Thursday, 21st of August, 2025. And just gonna dive straight into things. There is a lot of work being put into the next release. Um, so we're going to start off with some updates about that. Let's go over to Indy. Are you
Hey,
here and able? All right, Indy, let's go for an update from you on where all the bridging work is at.
yeah, currently bridging exists on of the West End testnet. So we have successfully deployed that there, and you can go to the Snowbridge UI and send over frequency over to Ethereum Sepolia. Um, the next steps are uh, doing the same thing on our Pascal testnet network. And what we're currently working on is setting up some more testing to be able to feel confident that we can um, then move that over to mainnet and so forth. So um, I'm excited to uh, get this on testnet so people to use. So yeah, that's it.
Cool.
Back to you, Will.
Thank you very much. That's exciting. I'll also say we don't need to go into the details of it because we did last time, but all the permissioning and schemas revisions are also in progress. So if you're interested, take a look at the frequency pull requests. You can see all the details of how that's all those details that we got last month being turned into actual code. And then there's also work going on to bump the Polkadot SDK version as well from its current one at 25.3 to 25.6. So some nice improvements coming in that we're looking forward to as well. Anything I missed on things upcoming in the next release? I know we've talked a little bit about some of the work around provider contexts and updating some of the additional app context work there. Anything else I've missed? Alrighty. We'll go on to community updates. The metrics are always great to take a look at and see over 2 million user activations, well over a million now graph activations, and almost at 11 million AT protocol content feed users that are being mirrored through frequency. So exciting to see those numbers going up as always, but also a nice to see the all the hard work that's gone into frequency getting used by lots of great people. Let's switch now to other community updates. Let's go to Shannon for some gateway release update information. Shannon?
Sure, thank you. Okay, so let me share my screen.
Yep, I
Will
probably
that
have to
work?
stop mine
Okay,
first. There you go.
and I will go to here. Okay, um, so with a few deadlines past us, we've been taking some time to shore up our code bases, various code bases, and Gateway is one. Attending to things that had been a lower priority, but were nonetheless important. So here are two of the latest minor version bumps that we have released. Mainly, you'll just see it's largely just sort of quality of life bug fixes, small improvements to the code, some cleanup, some logging, etc. So that's going to continue, and I want to show you the. Excuse me, I've got some toolbars in my way. I've got to get them out of the way. A second. Okay, so you can see here's our project board. We are working on some load testing and lead testing, support for IPFS cluster, and for those developers using Gateway, we want to make improvements to sign in with frequency documentation and a mock sign in with frequency service. We are also looking on improving content publishing, checking. We're going to add some checking for delegations here soon. So that's with Gateway. So the next thing I want to talk about, I would like to talk about Parquet.js. Parquet.js is our fork of the JavaScript implementation of Apache Parquet.js standard. It's used by our organization. It is used by Gateway, which is one reason why I tied it into this, and it's increasingly being seen as the version most in active development. So it is also being used by external parties, including Microsoft, actually. Well, some developers at Microsoft. So it is increasingly written in TypeScript. Will here recently submitted a bug fix. There have been some recent work on outstanding issues. Look for a minor version bump in the next week, and we'll be continuing this trend for the next few weeks. As you can see, we've got a couple of this. Gabe Orelic submitted some nice PRs for us. We have option to treat int95 as a timestamp, also by an outside contributor. We've got an update to dependencies, but here is the fix from last year. Fix the metadata statistics comparison. That was a really great fix. So thank you very much to Will for that. And I hope to present even more and new and exciting changes next time. Thank you.
Cool. It's exciting. Alrighty, we're gonna go keep going down the list. Actually, I'll probably stop sharing again here in a second. Claire, I know there was just a release of provider dashboard out live. I'm gonna give a little
Yes.
update of that.
Yes, I am happy to. It looks like it just actually went live, so I'm happy to do a quick demo. Hopefully, I have tokens in my accounts, and this looks good. Okay, so a couple big things. We in this newest release, this is the live site. It went through. If you were paying attention earlier this morning, it was not, or this meeting, it was not going through. Now it is. Anyway, so we have updated our header to be consistent with styling across frequency. Quite a few stylistic things as well as functional things. We now have our drop downs matching the standard from our style guide as well. Let's log in real quick. We have moved a couple of things around. The connection status is now here, as well as the button to switch providers. A new feature included in this release is that users are now able to unstake from a provider. Initially, we were only just staking. Now we can unstake. We don't have any tokens staked yet for this user, it looks like. So this will fail, but we can show the error message. Oh, it's not failing, canceled. Well, I will look into that. Anyway, this is the flow that you go through. You select your wallet control key and you select your amount to unstake from the provider, and you click the button and sign and go through that. You'll see updates on that transaction come through in the activity log, which you'll be able to see your history through here. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple of things from the release, but those are the big ones. Any questions? We're moving on.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Claire. Excited to see the stylistic updates, but also those feature updates getting in there as well. So we'll keep going. Just as a reminder here, in just a minute, we will be into open questions. So if you have any open questions, definitely feel free to drop them into the chat or feel free to get your hand up and we'll go to those here in just a minute. We've got one other tool to show off, a new roll-up inspector tool. This is a tool designed by by us working with frequency, and specifically designed to help with frequency inspections, but it works on any thing. So you select your relay chain, select a parachain, roll-up chain as well. We'll select frequency in this case and connect. And this will actually connect to both the parachain and the relay chain at the same time and give you a lot of additional details on what's actually happening to the roll-up portion of these blocks so that they are secured and validated by the larger Polkadot relay chain. So you're able to see the different blocks coming through, and there's sometimes you'll see more than one block get announced. If things are happening, you'll see it actually get backed in the relay chain, and then there it is included and all packaged and finalized. So this is a tool to help kind of see those and see a lot of the different individual details on things. So not for the average person, but if you're interested in kind of being able to watch and see the details, that's available now in the frequency chain GitHub as well. So I'll actually show you that GitHub here real quick. There we go. So this is the roll-up inspector. So definitely, if you're interested, feel free to check it out. Pull requests are always welcome. With that, we will flip back to the slideshow, and we do have a question in chat. I think this is coming out of Claire's demo chat. Would you like to unmute and give the question, or I can read it out if the person who made it does not wish to?
Sure, yeah. I think that provider tool, you can only get into it if you are a provider or have access to a provider's keys, right? But the staking functionality is something that in theory any user could do. So is there a plan to separate that functionality or make it possible to do if you're not a provider?
I am going to say that I am not quite sure. We have seen the rewards boosting dashboard designs come through, which is user-based rather than provider-based. But as far as I understand, that was deprioritized. So I am, I guess, looking to leadership on what they would like to do to implement that.
Yeah, let's throw this one over to Harry. Do you have any idea on timelines for kind of the user portion of that interface for staking?
So two things on the question. First is, I think from the provider boosting standpoint, you're right, that interface is not complete yet. I'm not sure exactly what the timelines are for that, but it is still sort of on the roadmap. From a standpoint of being able to, as a user versus a provider, stake without boosting, while that's a technical capability, I don't know if we're going to expose a separate tool for that. It's always possible to sort of do directly, but the encouraged actions, if you will, are that users primarily interact with capacity via boosting, and providers primarily interact because of the efficiency with regular capacity staking. And so that's why that's being exposed at that tool level.
Yep, as a quick reminder for people who aren't necessarily as familiar with things, capacity has effectively two different ways to interact with it. One is called maximum capacity staking, which is primarily focused on applications that wish to maximize how much capacity they have to interact with the chain. The second being capacity boosting or boosting, which is a user designed so that users receive a little bit of a reward for participating in the action of boosting, and they get to choose a provider and application that receives some capacity as well. So this allows for users to kind of express their sentiment and actually explicitly support applications, as well as receive a reward for participating in that public act of supporting different applications.
Thanks. I mean, sticking with the maximum capacity version of that, though, uh, is it possible to stake from an account that is separate from the control key that you use as the provider login?
There is not currently a separate, like a non-developer UI for that, but that's definitely something I think that should be potentially on the roadmap, whether that happens through the same way that users do it, or it's a separate one or a separate piece of the provider dashboard is still to be determined.
Thanks.
All righty. Any other open questions? Wide open to anyone who has any. Drop it in chat or raise a hand up. I'm checking to see if there are any, but I don't see any others yet. So let's go on to the open discussion list item. There's a couple different discussion items that we go through today, but I think the one of the interesting ones to talk about is schema type raw. So this is a schema type that's been talked about for a while, off and on. Currently in frequency, there are effectively two different types of schemas that are allowed. One is a parquet schema that is designed for batching or large amounts of data. That's used, for example, by the AT protocol on frequency to put a large amount of data through frequency without the additional overhead on frequency itself. DSMP also uses that for content publishing and other activities of that sort. And then there's Avro, which is designed primarily for on-chain, doesn't have to be, but primarily for on-chain data, where you need a structure, a data structure around that data so that you can know how to decode it. And that works for protocols or data that has a structure, but it doesn't have a particular serialization system for said structure. So this is used, for example, in DSMP for the on-chain graph system. Since DSMP does not have it has a data structure, but it does not have a particular serialization system for said data. And so you're able to have an Avro data structure that identifies that structure. However, there are times when you may not wish to have a serialization structure, or you are working with a protocol that already has a serialization system. One example of this is the open timestamps structure, which I have used as an example of how to build schemas and have protocols work on DSMP on frequency before. And it actually specifically, let's see if I thought it was here, but they don't have a nice little setup for it. So it specifically has a value that ends up being just a hash. So the data structure for this protocol is explicitly one that is, there is no data structure, there is merely a single value, and that is a hash. So while you could very much use and create an Avro schema for that single point of data, there's an overhead of Avro that's just not needed. There is already effectively a serialization method for that system. So the suggestion here is at least that we have like some form of raw schema type. Maybe there's also data limited sequence. There's still some way to describe like how do I learn how to decode this raw data. So maybe there's a URL or something that links to the schema's structure, especially if it has a different serialization system that's not directly supported by frequency. Say, for some reason, somebody's doing, say, a fixed width serialization system. And that's indeed one of the kind of alternatives here is like fixed width is effectively another, could easily do some version of the same thing where you have single or you can describe the width of the field in the particular case of open timestamps. Fixed width would work, but not everything is necessarily fixed width. So that is kind of the topic for discussion. So throwing it open to people who have, you know, like the idea, dislike the idea. If you have additional ideas on how to solve this problem or other paths. But the whole goal of this at the end of the day is how do we, in frequency, quickly support additional protocols being migrated and usable in frequency. So throwing it open, open to anyone. Joe, you've got your hand up. Go ahead. And
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and an alternative might be, instead of just having a raw schema type wherein the published schema specifies everything about the schema, like the, you know, like you said, maybe a URL on where to decode it, but then you run into potentially duplicative efforts, right? Like there might be a type of schema that you want to represent different kinds of data. So you have multiple schemas, but they all resolve to the same sort of underlying library or something. What if we explored the idea of, because right now in frequency, and what I'll refrain from using the word schema, and I'll instead say a model type, which is how we refer to it, right? We have an enum that's part of the code base that is currently only allows Parquet or Avro. What if instead of being baked into the code, it was its own on-chain entity that could be affected by governance, essentially to add new schema model types, so that there would be metadata associated with the model type that if you wanted, if you wanted to, you could pull and go resolve the URL to find documentation on how to decode things. But then once a model type was published, any future schema could be published that implemented that model type by its ID instead of by a hard-coded enum.
allowing for effectively, like, let's say someone wanted to use, you know, let's say comma separated values, right? As an easy example, then governance could say, yes, comma separated values are allowed to be used. Here's, the specific comma separated value standard, which is not super standardized, unfortunately, for comma separated values, but that here's the standard that this specifically refers to and should use, and then not just one, but any other models could theoretically also decide, any other schemas could decide to use that model. But we'd have the documentation of like, here's how you actually implement, here's how you define the model, etc. on that. So I'm going to summarize that, and then we'll go to Peter actually here in a second. Alternative version is make models governance controlled. And in theory there, you could make a model, even if it was just for one, it could be a model of one of like hash or something like that, which you reuse. Let's go to Peter.
Yeah. So, and I think this Joe's alternative actually kind of touches on what my problem was. Like, if you had like a raw schema, what does that mean for the people downstream trying to consume that data, right? Because presumably your hashing example, your comma separated value example, some other person putting random blobs of stuff, like how does one consume that downstream if I don't know what it is? And maybe I can't see the forest for the trees potentially, and there's another way to dereference to that, but I thought the schema was exactly that. So that was my problem, just thinking about downstream. How do you interpret the data?
Yeah, I'd say that's and Joe correctly called me out on this. The model contains the kind of information, the details of how to extract the data, but there's still always that human requirement that you need to know, even if you have the data, like what does this data mean? So I would say for something like raw, it would be you wouldn't be consuming it unless you understood already what that meant. And so as part of that understanding, you would know this means open timestamp hash or something like that. So I think it doesn't completely remove the problem if we tell you kind of additional metadata, because even if we said here, oh, we're going to create a type hash. Okay, well now I know the data I pull is a hash, but I still can't, like, the interpretation of the fact that it's a hash is still reliant on the fact that this schema was designed to be an open timestamp standard hash.
So does that imply that like given the publisher, I should know how to interpret it? Is like because presumably more than one person could just dump stuff into the raw, right? Or am I missing
Correct.
something? So okay.
So given the schema ID, you with raw, given the schema ID, you should know what to do with that data, would be my response. But it is difficult. The advantage of having a model that's there is that anyone can do a validation of that data model, right? And say, hey, I know I don't have to understand how to use this data, but I can know whether or not you're producing correctly structured data, I would say.
All right, I see.
Let's go to Abramic.
Yeah, I just want to say we have to be careful. If we have a dynamic model type, it has to be designed in a way that we don't have to check additional thing on chain every time we are writing something. So if you're registering a new schema, maybe it's fine, but for that you have to consider that. That's my only concern with the making it dynamic. And the other question I had is kind of like with Peter, like I think you answered somehow, like how does somebody looking from outside would know how to parse it, how to use it, which I think you addressed in some degree.
Joe, let's go to you.
Yeah, kind of in response to both Aramik and Peter. First of all, in regards to like any kind of on-chain checking, I think validating content against a published schema is currently not in the purview of anything we do on chain. It's too expensive and we don't we don't do it. With regards to knowing how to decode it, obviously the published model would presumably, like, let's take the example of, say, you used Will comma separated. I don't think there is a standard model descriptor for comma separated, other than a comma separated data file may optionally contain a header line that indicates the names of the columns to be parsed. So theoretically, a model for a comma separated schema may include that comma separated list of column names. Or it may be a generic model that's just any comma separated that, you know, that's kind of a simplistic example, but I don't think there's a lot of on-chain implications, because at least currently, we don't have any use cases where we validate the payload. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, we do validate IPFS CIDs, which is often used with which is more of the off-chain piece of what's usually used by Parquet. We did do some work towards validating the external Avro schema, but I don't believe we actually implemented that. I know for some things like fixed width, we could theoretically at least limit the width, right? There's some validation that could happen on some of those pieces. But we also have a comment from Aram. Do you want to go ahead and read it out, Aramik?
Yeah, I mean, if you're making the type dynamic, then it means on every submission, you have to check the incoming type against those dynamic types. So I don't see how you would avoid that. It doesn't matter the content.
If I
Yeah, go.
So again, we don't actually like for publishing a schema, we would need to check that the published schema is claims to implement a registered model. But for publishing content payloads, again, we don't inspect the content payload itself. We simply trust that whatever binary set of bytes is being sent actually implements the schema that the sender claims it implements, but we don't actually inspect it. And even in your case, Will, with the IPFS CID, that is, I think, less a schema thing and more because really the schema is not the CID itself that we're sending. The schema is the pointer to the off-chain content that we claim implements the model.
True. Yeah, the schemas themselves are validated by governance at the creation time, but the validation of the data is all done currently at read time, not write time. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I just wasn't clear before so Joe, you have your on-chain hat on, which is totally makes sense from where you do most of your work. But I'm saying, okay, I'm going through chain state. I see some raw schema come in. Now I'd like to inspect, like, never mind the schema itself. Like, who knows if I can even read the thing? But then interpreting that data as a consumer downstream, or am I not thinking correctly on how schemas actually work? Because something needs to interpret it eventually to make it useful just to someone, right? I understand the chain doesn't care. With you there, that makes it easy. It's the next step, the next hop is where I get confused. Does that make sense? I don't know if it's too freeform.
Yeah, so the schema model that's published should provide a client with enough instruction on how to interpret a payload published to that schema. Now, it may or may not be completely digitally consumable, depending on to use is depending on how formally the model's schema is implemented, right? Like if it's just a hash, okay, the schema may tell, the model may tell you to interpret this as a hash value, but what that hash value means, you have to have some context for.
Yeah. So it's kind of this level of we have the validation of the structure of the data, which we would want anyone to be able to validate so that anyone can kind of point at a person and a producer of content and say that producer is producing bad content. Bad meaning does not match the published structure. Maybe it's a misconfiguration. It's not necessarily incorrect from a it's not necessarily malicious, but it could be it could easily be an accident. But anyone can kind of validate at least the external structure for like encrypted graph and things like that. You can only validate the external structure of it, not the encrypted data itself. And then the validation of the data, like does this data actually make sense, right? I can validate that something is appears to be a 32-bit hash, but I can't tell you if that 32-bit hash is correct unless I have the data that goes along with it, which the whole point may be that I don't have to have that data published in the case of something like open timestamps. So the validation of the data and the kind of that meaning of the data, does it make sense? Is someone posting, in the case of like DSMP, are they posting content that's pure gibberish, or are they posting content that is intelligible by someone, which of course then has its own layers, being encrypted, just being in a different language, right? Someone's deciding to speak in Pig Latin, or someone's cat is trying to communicate through social media. All of those have valid human meanings, but may not to the external. So there's kind of that level of only those who understand the human meaning of the structure can kind of validate the data, but the structure still being validatable by anyone is, I think, a very valuable piece to the puzzle. Other comments, thoughts on this topic? Wes, go ahead.
I'm not sure I have fully formed thoughts, but I think the more complex we make it, the more we run the risk of reinventing the MIME type system. And so I like the simplicity of raw if there is a well-defined format for the model for raw schemas that has that reference to where to find out how to figure it out, so to speak. So perhaps there is let's call it a JSON format that is prescribed for people whose data is in any other format than Parquet or Avro. And they use a well-defined JSON schema that the chain prescribes to define their model and basically what it might have in there is simply a URL to find out more about that type, or perhaps there's some useful things you could have in there that would allow some basic level of validation, like a regular expression or something that could be optional.
Yeah, and that would work with something like a fixed width. You could, maybe fixed width is separate from raw and would be its own, because fixed width is very much at least a fairly validatable, like this piece of data this long, this piece of data this long, and this is the meaning of the data. It very much kind of fits still with the kind of I'm encoding this object into a fixed width serialization. Other thoughts, comments? Joe, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, do we think it might make sense, since this had been rattling around in my brain anyway, and Wes mentioned it, to allow for just specifying a model as a MIME type? I mean, optionally. I mean, obviously you want, like, raw would give you the ability to define a structure, but you could also just give it the meta information of this schema is this MIME type.
Are you saying within raw
Within raw, yeah, like you can
type of MIME type field?
sort
Yeah,
of optionally either just say it's this MIME type, or you can give it a custom structure.
that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have something like URL and my URL and MIME type, or something like field, or other serialization structure data, right, or something. I kind of like this of just like, hey, if it's raw, you have to give us a URL that talks about it and the MIME type of the data. Although for, I guess, MIME type, you'd still have like plain text and such if you were just putting it directly on chain or something like that.
Octet stream.
Octet stream. Oh yes, there's that one.
I'll throw in that we should probably call it content type rather than MIME type.
Yeah. And we could also, I guess, put in a little, a text description field as well. All right. This seems like we're getting a little bit closer to an actual, like, hey, raw, here's what raw looks, here's how you define a raw type model. It's a little more flexible. Maybe the raw is really the wrong word there. Perhaps this is external or some other named thing. But I feel like that's a good movement towards a potential solution and being able to, again, the idea of this is to expand out the space of uh, schemas, the types of schemas that frequency can support. So with that, the next frequency community call, Thursday, the 18th, September 2025, same time currently. Just a note, the next community call will have probably a few other changes, looking at trying to expand the spaces that people can join from, not just Zoom, but perhaps on YouTube and a few other places. So look forward to some changes there. So watch out if you make sure that when you try to join next time, you have an up-to-date link to get to the right place. But exciting to see what is coming up for frequency next. So thank you, everybody, and have a happy rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.